Hello, my name is Matthew Speirs, and this is the ethical dilemma of Jade and Drew. Stage one. Stage one is the psychologist's conflict between two ethical obligations. The first one being respecting the right of confidentiality of a former client, and this being Drew. The second one being upholding honest communication with a current client, and in this case would be Jade. According to Youngren and Gottlieb, in 2004 article, attempting to adhere to one more than the other does have adverse effects. Either way, a decision should be based on what is considered to be more morally right than what it is wrong. And what Youngren and Gottlieb have found and suggested as a strength in the Code of Ethics is that it can be interpreted in a way that is positive from the positive psychology aspects. Rather than just abiding by the rules at a minimum standard, psychologists can uphold them, live them, and embrace them through these difficult ethical situations. Stage two. Stage two is in reference to APS principles and standards. The first one being a breach in confidentiality with Drew would be to disclose that he was a former client to Jade, which is a direct violation of general principle A, respect for the rights and dignity of people and peoples. The second one being dishonesty in communication with Jade would be to omit that Drew was a former client, which is a direct violation of general principle C, integrity. So both of these principles are in the Code of Ethics and the Australian Psychological Society. Stage three. So stage three is to do with the values trap. And for me personally, I would struggle and be conflicted with transparency and honesty as a personal value over confidentiality. The reason for this is that it could go either one of two ways. The first one being where I sit on this is that I believe telling the truth to Jade about Drew being a former client could create really strong rapport and be imperative to creating that really true connection. And in my opinion, it could allow her to come to terms with the reality of the end of her relationship with Drew, and therefore could provide as a healing method. However, on the flip side of this is that it could trip me up in my ethical decision-making, because if Jade doesn't react well to this, it could cause more harm to herself, to Drew, or more importantly, it could cause harm to the baby that they share joint parenting with. Stage four. Stage four is to do with the rights and vulnerabilities of each of these persons involved. So Jade's vulnerabilities is that she has difficulty with trust. As it was stated previously in the case scenario, it was a big hurdle for Jade to come into therapy in the first place, which took her about 3 months to even make that decision. Therefore, finding out about this could damage the professional relationship and plateau their growth. The psychologist's vulnerabilities are receiving emotional retaliation from either Drew or Jade if confidentiality were to be breached, or if honesty and communication were to be violated. According to Campbell and Gordon, in 2003's article, psychologists' vulnerabilities are difficult to deal with in ethical situations due to some of the limitations of the Code of Ethics, insinuating that the client's needs are more important than the psychologist's at times. And the last one being Drew's right to confidentiality of his personal information. So stage five brings us to two possible actions that can be made from here. So the first one being doing nothing and saying nothing and continuing to provide therapy to Jade. The second one is recommending a different psychologist due to a conflict of interest. Stage six. So stage six, first actions, consequences It would be to keep Drew's confidentiality, which would be a positive. However, as Lewicki and Pollan in 2013 have stated, with trust, there needs to be an element of honesty. In this case, if Jade were to find out from an external source that wasn't the psychologist, this could lead to distrust in this professional client relationship and may retain from honest conversations in the future and prevent those really important conversations, which definitely detriments her development and growth. The other action consequences is more of a gray area. It could break Drew's confidentiality, as Jade could be hesitant for change and question why there is a conflict of interest. However, one of the positive things out of this action is that it could enable more honest and productive and ethical conversations, benefiting the psychologist and Jade. As Hansen in 2005 has highlighted, disclosure as a therapy technique has shown to be twice as helpful than not for psychologists. Hansen in 2005 has also emphasized the great help of supervisors and other psychologists to give Jade and clients objective and unbiased views in these ethical situations, which benefits everyone. Stage 7. So the final decision that I've come to is the decision will be to recommend a different psychologist due to a conflict of interest. This means that Drew's right to confidentiality is kept anonymous unless it gets to a point where it is causing harm to Jade, Drew, or the child. The procedure will be to ask Jade if she would feel comfortable with a psychologist joining in on their conversations and on their sessions. So there will be 2 psychologists in the room. According to SAR, though, in 2019, there is a tendency for clients to decline this offer of a psychologist joining in due to personal reasons, and one of them being, in this case, Jade's trust issues. However, if it were to be permitted and allowed by Jade, integrating another psychologist into these conversations is very beneficial, as it allows honest and objective communication to be paramount and at the center of the well-being of Jade. And slowly over time, the transition of the original psychologist will become more distant and faded. And therefore the new psychologist will be at the forefront and will be creating pathways and ambitions with Jade to determine her goals and what she wants in the future. And this is exactly what we want. We want to avoid breaking confidentiality at all costs of Drew, but at the same time, trying to benefit Jade and try and get the best out of her in this therapy as well. And that is the best possible situation that I've decided to share with you. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.